Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics with a new installment of the Exit Meetings. This week we are back in the CanWest with an extremely special guest to talk about his Manitoba Bisons squad. So to learn all about how the herd's doing, we're going to get our guest in here, but not before I say, Tom, how the heck are you doing, my friend?
Oh man, I am doing so well. We have a very special guest, like you mentioned. He is a three-time Hardy Cup champion. He is a Vanier Cup champion. He has been your Manitoba Bisons defensive coordinator since 1999. Defensive coordinator and head coach Stan Pierre joins the program here. Coach Stan, how are you doing this fine day?
I'm wonderful. What an introduction. If I knew it was going to be so welcoming, I said yes right away anyways, but I don't know if I could have said it any faster, but I'm very happy to be there and I really appreciate the enthusiasm. I'm excited. Let's get going.
Well, Coach, again, we really appreciate you giving us some of your time to talk about not just your club, but talk about yourself and sort of the history of the Bison since you've been there. Because I kind of want to start off before we get into the year that was, players that might be moving on to new horizons, everything that kind of is what people are wanting to find out about your team right now. But before we dive into it, I want to talk about you a little bit and specifically the transition from, as Tom alluded to, being that defensive coordinator for, like almost 3 decades, and then taking over from such a legendary coach, your former coach, no doubt friend and mentor, and Coach Doby, and being able to take over a program where clearly you as a huge part of that, but where there was so much success with him at the helm. You take over in your first year. Like, just take us through, and those listening, what that was like for you, where no doubt there was going to be some things that you're like, well, this is just how Manitoba Bisons football works. But I imagine too, you take over this position, probably part of you is like, but here's where I maybe want to start to, not completely throw everything out, but maybe tweak things a little bit. What was that transition like, taking over from one of the legendary coaching figures in our sport?
I think the way you said it is really right. Coach Dobie and I have been working together for so many years. You're right. We're very good friends. We've really been partners at this thing during the whole time that we've been together. So, in terms of transition, there was a lot of stuff that I was already doing. There's a lot of decisions that I was already involved in. Nothing about the job really surprised me. I was really prepared. Yeah, we just did everything together all that time. So I think the biggest transition was just not having him there every day. That was the, toughest thing for me. I don't know, you work with somebody for that many years, you can just bounce things off each other and know where each other's coming from, and have very frank, comfortable conversations. So that was definitely a transition for me, but sure, were there things that, I wanted to do a little different? Sure, of course there was, and those are things that would come up from time to time during our time together. And, then the conversation would end. I'd go, okay, man, it's your team. And then off we would go, doing it the way he wanted to. Yeah. So but you're right. It's not a million things.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly you've held that associate head coach title since 2005. And like you mentioned, I'm sure there's a number of really great things that you're bouncing off of each other and allowing yourselves to be, a very, very competitive team in the CanWest, arguably the hardest division that we have in U Sports, with the parity that's there. And now even talking about going into last year, into this year, going into 2024, going into 2025, you finished with a 7-2 record in 24 versus a 4-4 in 2025. And I don't think that's a testament or a lack of anything else that's happening here, but more so it is a testament to just the CanWest and how volatile things can be and how up and down things can be. So for the folks who are listening from across the country here, not located in that conference, what can you tell us about what just playing in that conference for so long means and how tough it is to just get out of that conference?
Sure. I mean, all those things you said are true. As we went through our schedule, there was hardly a game that we couldn't have won, and there was hardly a game that we couldn't have lost during that entire season, So, like you said, we were 7-1 the year before, and, was that, indicative of how dominant we were? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, things just, it's a short season, and things can go your way a couple extra times. Doesn't mean we weren't good. We were good last year too.
Mhm.
It was a hard, it was a competitive year for sure. I think, you know, our team definitely did have a transition. A change is can jolt the system from time to time. So some as well. But at the end, I thought that our football team was really playing well at the end of the year. Thought we had a really good chance of winning in Regina. It was an unfortunate end in overtime season, but we had a couple opportunities to win that football game, which we just couldn't get over the hump. And the margins are so thin. That's the Canada West. So
Mhm.
I was certainly proud of the effort. I mean, we started 0, we had two really tough holes to start on the road, and then had an amazing game against Saskatchewan at home, kind of down early, and they flopped back at the beginning of our season.
Well, and coach, you hit the nail on the head because again, I wanted to build off of what Tom mentioned there, and that you take over, and obviously, as we've been discussing here, you've been a part of the highest of highs that clearly this program has been able to accomplish during your tenure there with Coach Doby. But there is that transition, and then put aside a tough preseason battle with Regina. You drop those two close games, and then you have the Hardy Cup champs in Saskatchewan coming into your house where you pull off this nail biter upset, your first win as a head coach now with these Bisons, with your herd. Just talk to us about when the final whistle blew in that game against Saskatchewan, picking up that win. I mean, I'm sure there's part of you that's just, hey, on to Alberta, right? We got it. The season continues. But I have to imagine, especially against a perennial powerhouse in the Saskatchewan Huskies, when, again, obviously a lot of health issues that happened with that team, obviously with Anton Ammanroon, obviously we're all pulling for the best for him. But that's when that team fully loaded up with that offense as good as they were.
Right.
Talk to us a bit about what the emotions were when those final whistles blew.
Yeah. Mostly, I was just relieved that we got a win.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, the kids were really carrying the burden for me. They were very conscious of it. I was less worried about it. You know, it's the same program. I've been there so long. It didn't feel. It felt a little different, but it wasn't that tangible. Or it's like, oh man, this is, you know what I mean. I felt the same way as the coordinator when we lost as I did as the head coach. So that those things were, yeah. First, I didn't feel anything really other than just relief that, okay, we may have just saved our season here. Maybe we can build on this. The kids saw what they were capable of doing. We also had a new OC, which was another what was happening. Those things were starting to click. I was relieved that we had won the game. I was uncertain of what our season would look like if we started 0-3, and that was really what was going through my head at that time.
Yeah, certainly. Like we already mentioned, the slow start, but then the strong finish going into the back half, finishing the year at 4-4 when you're starting at 0-3 in the Can West is certainly a feat to hang your hat on. And when you look at the rest of the league, when you look at this team and the makeup that you have here, we can't we have to talk about the offense and the guy leading that offense, which is Jackson Tuchinski. When you have a guy like that, and obviously yourself being a defensive coach and you see the capabilities that he has, where if a play breaks down, it's almost to your benefit with how athletic he can be and the run and gun style here. Now, obviously losing AK Kasama going into this year, the number one, the best arguably receiver in all of the Can West. Now, having him join the coaching staff is also another huge benefit to the rest of those receivers for sure. But losing that main target here means that Jackson's taking off with it maybe a little bit more often than he's not. And obviously having, Braden Stubbs in the back end means that your run game is one of the very best that's out there. But talk to me a little bit about what it means to have coached Jackson Tuchinski and the play style that he has, where he's got the cannon arm to throw it 60 yards down the field, but he is very more often than not going to take off and burn people on the ground as well.
I mean, obviously, a very special player, very special talent, really great leader for our team. It was a privilege coaching Jackson. That was the one thing about becoming the head coach that I really enjoyed, was building more of a relationship with the offensive players. I mean, obviously, I know all the kids and I talk to all the kids, but it's different when I wouldn't be having meetings with the Jacks like, I need you to come to my office and when I want to talk about the game plan or stuff like that. That stuff wasn't happening when I was the DC. So that was really rewarding. Obviously super talented, really gifted athlete. Do I wish maybe he took off a little less? It always in my breath every time he did, but he was just such a physically gifted athlete, and I think he probably is the best Manitoba-born quarterback that's been through our program. I mean, I've been around a lot of years and I know a lot of the history, and he's just been an unbelievable representative of our program.
Well, Coach, I love how you brought up that kind of holding of your breath moment when he, vacates the pocket, because we've had the privilege of talking with Taylor Elgizma over the years, and of course talking with Coach Faulds, Coach Galloway, in their time working with him. And perhaps it's just Tom and I being former offensive linemen, but you see the quarterback get hit and just makes you giddy or makes you nervous. And as they've always said, that, well, you just don't get the best of him if you try to tell him to rein it in those areas that might make you a little nervous. Is that kind of how Jackson is, that like to have him at the best that you get, which, as we've alluded to, and just anyone who's followed this league the last 4 or 5 years knows, the best you get out of Jackson Tuchinski is arguably the best Canada has to offer. Is that just that give and take you have to take as a head coach on that staff of like, hey, if we could have it perfectly, we might not want him getting all those hits, but that's just the dice roll you have to take with an athlete of that caliber?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what you gain trying to rein that in. Like he's trying to prove that's who he is. And, as a defensive coach, like, the hardest play to defend is the secondary play. You know what I mean? Like, you can have a great scheme and they run a play and you've defended it great. And then all of a sudden the quarterback, slips out and breaks the pocket. And then now, whatever happens after that is not something that we spent a lot of time practicing. You know what I mean? So it's, if you have a guy like that can do those sort of things, it makes it extremely, extremely difficult on the defense. So, yeah, I mean, he was who he was going to be, and I mean, you weren't going to coach it out of him anyways. You know what I mean? That's just who he was.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly one of the most dynamic players that we have in all of youth sports. But kind of going back into the schedule side of things here. So you get that big victory against Saskatchewan, 21-20 in your house, the only loss that Sask has in the regular season. Convincing victory against Alberta, another tough loss against Regina, and then finishing off with UBC and with Calgary. How do you take what is one of the toughest schedules from that standpoint, but also understanding for the folks who are watching and the folks who are listening here about the travel? There is no further distance in the Can West than Manitoba to UBC, and being able to manage that and the flights and everything else. How is it changed from that standpoint? Again, like you mentioned, you were always working in hand with Dobie and everything else, but coordinating and getting 18 to 23-year-old young men to stay focused on a plane ride going into another province and getting things done. Like, what does that process look like from top to bottom?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the advantages that we have in the Canada West. Our school gets to experience both, because we still travel by bus to the Saskatchewan provinces, but it really does give the kids a real professional experience when they're dressed up. They have to be at the airport on time, and they're they have meetings in the hotels and their workouts in the hotels and all that sort of scheduling stuff. And, in terms of managing it, like, it really hasn't been that difficult, like you say, because all those processes were in place, and our kids really are just used to it, So they're, I'm sure if we were starting from scratch, it might be really tough to wrangle them in. But if a new player who's on his first trip doesn't know what to do, he just follows the line, and they'll get to him where he needs to go. But I think it's a really, I mean, it's expensive, but it's a really great experience for our kids to be able to go through that, and it makes them feel like they're really big time.
Mhm.
Well, and we brought up already the semifinal game that your team was able to make the appearance in. What was the messaging from you going into a battle where you've faced this club twice already? It's a tight game in the preseason, and obviously people weigh preseason games differently depending on, well, they're rotating a little more or less, or we're trying out certain things and what have you. And you go to Regina for that mid-season battle, and they hand it to you pretty solidly to then
Yep.
come back and to take them down into two OTs, where the rarity of rarities in Can West football, a missed Maya Turner field goal,
Yeah.
ends up
Right.
being that deciding factor. I mean, what was the messaging like going into that? No, just number one of again, these subtleties of you're with Coach Dobie the whole way as that associate assistant head coach and running the defense, but now it's your message coming through. You've lost this team twice, and you're I'm sure it still gives you nightmares, but you're right there with them to the truly bitter end.
Yeah, I mean, I was fully confident that we were very capable of winning the football game, and I liked our plan. I liked the way we were playing. I think really, what you're saying, and this was kind of the culmination of the messaging that the kids have been getting the whole time, just to stay course and to continue with the process. And if we kept rowing in the same direction, for lack of a worse cliche, I think that we would be there in the end. And I was fully confident. I knew we were fully capable. I knew there were some things that we were working ourselves through. I knew we were going to play well. That I was as calm as you could be going into that game. I knew we were going to play well. I really did. Did I know we were going to win? Well, no. I mean, because it's really hard to win and it's really easy to lose football games. But I just knew we were going to play well. Yeah, I knew we were going to play 4 quarters. I knew we were going to play super hard, and I knew we had veteran leadership, and all those things are really important to win football games.
Mhm. Now, when you talk about this season, you talk about some of the outstanding players that you have here. Obviously, you've got 5 Canada West All-Stars, 3 of them on that defense in particular, Marcus Wall, Jerome Fouliard, and Nick Pereira here. As you're expanding out on the defensive side, and specifically, excuse me, talking to yourself, who has been at Manitoba for so long, what are you seeing in terms of the evolution of the offenses? We've seen a number of times, and there's oftentimes we have conversations where you can see almost a trend with certain teams in certain conferences. RSCQ, you have to play phenomenal defense to get out of there. OUA in previous years, you'd have to be able to run the ball. And in Can West, it seems more like a spread them out, high flying offense in a number of years here. And now slowly but surely, we're starting to see the tight end and double tight end set creep back into the formations and everything else. So talk a little bit about the all-stars that you have here, and what is defense and how is that evolving in the Can West since your start till now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, what's new is old again, what's old is new again. I think these things just go in cycles. I think that, defenses are reacting to what offenses are doing, and maybe they're changing their personnel. And, you'd be hard pressed to find a Canadian defense that didn't have a nickel linebacker, so of course, what our offense is going to do to counter that, right? So that they're getting a little bigger from time to time, like you said. But with the advent of the RPO run game too, that's really changed things in terms of the numbers and how we're defending people. It's really been quite exciting. I feel like there was some time in the early 90s, things were pretty stagnant. The football was not very diverse, and then all of a sudden it was. And ever since then, it's been really innovative, really challenging, really I mean, in terms of the satisfaction I get or the intellectual stimulation going against some of these great teams and great players and great coaches, it has been a remarkable transition, and I can't tell you how lucky I feel to be in this conference against such great talent and coaches. So I think in terms of the players that we have on defense, I think that that group has been building for a little while, and the kids that you talked about, uh, Marcus kind of came back from UND, and he was, our secondary was a bit questionable going into the year. Like if you asked me at this time last year what our team was going to be like, I'd say, well, I'm worried about our defense, but our offense should be okay. And it kind of turned out the opposite way. You know what I mean? We have good kids on defense. They're really good players. The ones that you talked about are really physical, really athletic guys. And Marcus is just flat out can cover. So I'm excited to have all those guys back, and hopefully they'll be able to keep us afloat during the transition as we work our way through to like you said, a new quarterback.
Well, the new quarterback, but also we mentioned the name of Braden Stubbs and probably have not thrown enough flowers at the feet of the career he had, donning the Bisons gear. Obviously, Matt Stokeman on that O-line, presumably moving on. So definitely some pretty big pieces on that offense. No doubt a couple more names. I don't remember where Udo slotted in terms of his eligibility.
Yeah, Udo's is still here, but he's CFL draft eligible, so we'll see what happens there with him. Yeah.
Well, and with what he did, not just in that Regina game, but I mean, if you're going to highlight one game, the performance he put up to, nearly pull off that upset. But then again, on the defensive side, also some young guys in the mix too, guys like Riley Ashley and Dario Macchia having really nice performances. So an interesting balance to, again, look at on the offensive side, some of these veterans that have defined Bison offense for the last 4 or 5 years that, as every coach talks about, it's just next man up mentality. And no doubt you have those players, you got your recruiters in place, finding the next players up, and then you have obviously your trainers, your positional coaches making them better. But all the while, a really nice stockpile of youth on that defensive side as well to no doubt develop with you being the defensive guy as well. So kind of talk about that position you're in where, again, you have players going on to the next level, moving on from their great career, but also having a nice mix of youth with your club as well.
Yeah, this is the nature of our business. The kids graduate and they move on to greener pastures, and this is it's part of, I think, like if you look at a guy like me who's basically had a one-stop career so many years, I think a part and parcel. I'm not sure that could happen in an environment where perhaps the players could stay longer. So it's always new and fresh. There's always a new kid going through the process for the first time. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I mean, I missed the year, but we're not just coaching them football, right? We're trying to give them tools to be successful in their life and in their careers. And the transition from 18 to 21 or 22 is remarkable. They changed so much, and it's all rewarding. Yes, it's challenging football wise to have new players, but that's what you sign up for. And to be honest, like if that's not what you enjoy as a coach, like maybe you shouldn't be coaching at this level. We're here to develop the kids. So it is what it is, I guess, for lack of a better term. By rule, these kids have to graduate. So the new ones come in, we coach them and train them the best that we can, make them the best people and players we see how it rolls out on Saturday. So, if that was something that I would lament, I mean, I've been through too many cycles now. I would be in the loony bin, like this is just what. Yeah, this is what it is. Like we have 19 seniors this year that graduated, and that's a big number, and but the kids who are behind them haven't been doing nothing, and they're waiting for their opportunity. So maybe there's somebody who comes in who surprises us. Somebody does
Hmm.
every year. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to, um, we're heading into spring football in a couple weeks, and I'm really looking forward to see the kids have worked extremely hard in the off season. So, I'm sure they're excited to see where they're at.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, we talked a lot about the seniors that are graduating, obviously Jackson Tuchinski and Braden Stubbs and everything else. But as you mentioned here as well, going into this year, you had a new but old face as your offensive coordinator in Blair Atkinson, obviously
Mhm.
serving as a receiver coach, as an OC for a little bit as well, and then bringing him back into the fold here. What's he been like to have back in the Bisons? Obviously, being the Bisons alum himself, he's got a lot of love for the school itself, and he's worked with you previously. But coming back into Manitoba now to help coach the offense, that can be a very difficult task when you have a fifth-year senior, fifth-year running back, and like an offense that's already been established as a top
Yeah.
tier. Coming into that and trying to just keep the ship afloat or trying to put your own spin on things can be a very difficult task. What can you mention? What can you say about Blair Atkinson and what he's bringing to the program now?
Yeah, and I think all those things you said are true, and that's he couldn't just do what we did before. Like it just wouldn't work if it's not him, if he doesn't feel it, if he doesn't even understand the nuances of what we were doing before as Vaughn understood it in his vision, So
Mhm.
those things are all true. It's been really good. I'll tell you the one thing I've really enjoyed is when it was just Coach Dobie and I in the building, we didn't have these conversations, So Vaughn was our OC, but he also worked outside of the facility. So like a lot of U Sports coaches do. So he wasn't in the building. Well, Blair's in the building, so we're talking all the time. So that's been really good for me. You know, just going through him, all the things that I see and what I think and what I like and what would give me problems and that sort of stuff. So that's been work in progress. It's been really enjoyable, and you know I think all the spring we see a lot of improvements from that and moving forward. And then in 3 or 4 years, there's going to be an entire new set of kids have grown up just doing what he's been doing, you know what I mean? So that'll make a difference for those kids when they're in their seniors and stuff like that. So it's been really great. Also, like, Vaughn hasn't left the program, so his counsel is always there and really great. I mean, I'm very proud of our staff. I'm very grateful for our staff. They've been there a lot of time, long time. They all have a lot of experience, a lot to our program. They do it kind of selflessly, as you know, because it's not like they're all getting $1 million to be there, and they're really helping the kids and they're helping Blair too. So everything. The most enjoyable part that I've had in my years at Manitoba, and when other people have come into our room, they've always commented about how well the coaches get along in the room.
Mm.
And that's really important to us. Like we want to be friends. We want to hang out. We hang out all the time. And I think a lot of us probably got into it because we were going to lose that from our we wanted that still in our life, so that's been really, really great. And so if you have a collegial attitude like that in a group like that, everybody's pitching in to help and move the program in the right direction. So that process just continues. So it's been really fun.
So you have your group of coaches, the collegiality, and I love that messaging because no doubt that trickles down when the players see that the coaches get along and kind of creates that energy and that culture. And you mentioned spring ball's on the horizon. No doubt the kids have been in the weight room relentlessly. Summer training, always that period where coaches, you might lose a little bit of the reins over your players and maybe you have a bit of the nerves of that. But before we know it, we're going to be into August. We're going to be through the draft, all these things
Mhm.
that are coming up. As you're getting ready for spring ball, as your coaches are having your meetings, what are the as we sit here mid-April, what are the thoughts? What are the ideas as far as the messaging for the 2026 Manitoba Bisons in terms of culture, identity, values, and all those types of things? Is it just a run back of last year? And in which case, again, I'm curious what that identifying sort of aspect of your club was, or if it's something new, what sort of the inspiration, what sort of that, idea you want to imprint on your players as they go into the spring ball off season and eventually a training camp for next year.
Yeah. Well, ever since I've been the head coach, the kids have heard a consistent message from me. Our program is about accountability and development. And the kids are accountable to handle their business. We're accountable to them. They're accountable to us. And if they stay the course, we're promising them that we're going to put everything into their development, both on and off the field. So that message is never going to change. And so they may be in different steps of their process, but the process remains the same for all of them. So we're trying to grow these kids systematically. We're not doing it by happenstance. They all have their own steps and goals that they're working towards. So, I'm trying to mold that together as a team, and that's kind of my job, not their job. You know what I mean? So I'm doing that stuff, in terms of, well, what's our talent core, and where do we put them in the best positions and that sort of stuff. But in terms of the kids' development, I don't to make it complex for them. They know what they have to do. I make it very clear what their expectations are, and we hold them to that standard consistently so that they can grow. So that's really what it is. That's what our program is about. And the kids that, which is the vast majority who have done that, I think we'll see tremendous gains come the spring. And I'm not going to lie, there are some kids along the way that just wasn't for them, which is fine. It wasn't for them, and no hard feelings, and they moved on to do something else. So that's really what the messaging remains. And it sounds cliche, but I really believe this. I'm not talking to them how good they're going to be or how good they're not going to be or whatever it is. It's always just, what's the next thing for you? Let's strive towards that, and then I'll make sure that we're all working in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, although you brought that up, and before I move on into my question here, you mentioned about how the Bison's coaching staff is. I've had the chance to meet and to listen to Andy Williams speak about defensive line play at East West, and I had a chance to meet up with Shaquille Armstrong as well. And if those two are ambassadors for the rest of your coaching staff, it must be a lot of fun in that locker room with those guys. They were phenomenal, but also very, very obviously knew their stuff when it came to that defensive line play. Listening to Andy and how he was going about the drills he was running was really, really awesome. One of the many reasons why I love East West just so much here. But one of the things that I'd like to talk about, obviously the recruiting space here, most kids, if they think they're good enough, oh, I should go down to the States because I want to try and get a scholarship, or I want to try to go to the NFL, or I want to try to whatever. And I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, I heard Coach Doby speak on another platform and just say, for some of the smaller D2 or D1 schools in the NCAA, like, we actually have a better track record sending guys to the NFL than they do.
Right.
Obviously, you have your star in David Onyemata, who's been an NFL pro for so many years here. But even a couple of years ago, Giordano Vaccaro goes down to Purdue. And you have this kind of track record where, if you're good enough, especially at Manitoba, like, you're going to find people who are going to have eyes on, and you're going to have those opportunities. What does recruiting look like in today's day and age for you here, and with all of those, those kids looking around saying, oh, I have to go down to the States, and you saying, no, like, you'll have the platform that you need right here in Manitoba if you want to try and go out for, you don't want to go to the CFL, you want to try to go to the NFL, whatever else. If you're good enough, we'll give you the platform. But what does that look like for you now as the head coach, really leading up that recruiting charge?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's something that the landscape down there is changing so much and so fast. So, firstly, if a kid is recruited by an FBS school and pay for their education and the money, I mean, they should go. They really should. But where I'm having a lot of those conversations with parents and kids are the ones who perhaps are going to go down south to finish their high school or go the prep route and stuff like that. Those are ones that, I want to make sure they're educated about exactly what they're getting into, and well, this is how many kids that have gone through that process. These are the ones who've been successful. These are the ones who haven't. Here's some of the stories that can happen if it hasn't happened that way. I think really that's where we're seeing it now, is either they're going to be a recruitable athlete, or they're going to work their way down south. In terms of, you know, if they are, in the U Sports pool, for the most part, most of them seem to be in U Sports pool. So we're competing against other U Sports, and we're recruiting against them that way. There's obviously kids, like, it's just so advanced now. So we might talk to a kid and we'll be like, ooh, he might be an NCAA guy. And then, within a couple weeks, it's like, oh, yeah, so-and-so got offered, and he got offered. Well, we're like, hey, man, don't forget we're here, but we're moving on and working back in that pool of U Sports kids. So it's been really interesting. I think we produce some really great athletes in Canada, and if they have the opportunity to go to a big school like that and have that experience, I don't begrudge them. But if not, or especially if particularly they're a late bloomer, I just think that a lot of they don't have the same pedigree from grade 2 to grade 12 of being exposed to football and the skill in football and sort of stuff. That doesn't mean that they can't get there. If they come to sports school, they can get that development that they need to do whatever they want. And the one thing I've learned in my career is that if a player is good enough, the NFL will find the way to your practice at some time. It's, you know what I mean? It's not like we're actively, sending stuff to the NFL like, hey, you should look at this guy. But just one day the phone rings and, hey, it's so-and-so from this team or so-and-so from this team. We'd like to come visit your school, and that's what it is. So our kids are plenty talented, and they can get there. Sometimes it takes a little, but in terms of the recruiting question, that's really what I've noticed. The U Sports pool seems to be the U Sports pool, and the other pool seems to be separating fairly quickly in the process. Yeah.
Coach, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, I was on the 2015 Guelph team that came to visit y'all for a little preseason
that's
matchup.
Wonderful. The worst storm in the history of storms.
Worst storm ever. And I've probably told this story on the podcast. Only time I've ever heard Coach Lang like really chew us out, because we came out flat. Because in fairness, like, there was some 2 hours between that first warm-up, and he just ripped into us for that. But had the opportunity, I'm a former offensive lineman, to go against the Mr. Onyemata, which was some kind of an undertaking for the quarter or so he was in there. But you alluded to it also, guys like Israel Adonijay coming through your program, all the scores of players gone to the CFL. And what I guess I want to ask you about specifically, of whether it's Adonijay, Onyemata, and some of these immense talents that you've got to work with on the defensive side, because no doubt their development to becoming the players that they became, kind of going back to that last part of the conversation, has to do with how you develop them. But no doubt every now and then a player just happens to drop on your front porch where you're like,
100%.
I kind of have to stay out of the way a little bit. This player, like, how do you deal with when you've had some of these talents? And again, it's not to say that you and your coaches don't help them on their way. You obviously do, but where it's just like, this kid's just got the thing, that unquantifiable, just ballerness. And how do you coach those types of talents?
Yeah. So, I think the answer, as hard as you can. This is the thing that I try to articulate to our kids all the time. They all have aspirations of, doing something ball wide, an all-star, be an all-Canadian, or go to the CFL. And I try to tell them, like if you're not 100% all in, you're competing against 100% all in, and don't fool yourself and think that you're not. So the one thing about those kids is, of course, they were immensely talented, and the reason they made the NFL wasn't necessarily because we developed them. It was because, they were touched on the way out and said, you get all this and you get all this, and that's 100% true. The way they're wired is what is remarkable. That you soon realize that they're doing all kinds of things to try, like, in Onyemata's case, he was a guy who didn't even really understand football. No, I'm being serious, so he spent all his time studying football and training, and and never a problem in school, right? Always doing the things that he had to do to stay on course. And he didn't even know what his course was. Like, a couple years in, I went to him, I said, listen, man, like, what are you thinking here? Because I think, like, you have a chance, you could kind of go as far as you want in this thing, like, and I think that was helpful too, the fact that I was able to recognize it because I'd seen it before, and say, no, you have like, forget the CFL for a second here. Like, let's talk about, like, what you want to do. And then just like setting a path forward and just coaching the heck out of that person, but watching them they're just the perfect kid when you're coaching for just doing everything plus. You don't have to tell them to do something. You don't have to ask them they're doing more. They're just driven. It's entirely different. And a lot of kids have a lot of talent, and I talk to them and I say, is this something you really want? Because this and this is really what it takes. And a lot of times there's something missing. And if it shows up in something, it often shows up in something else. So, well, I don't really like school. Well, okay, I get it, but this is a path. This is part of the deal. So you have to just do it. You know what I mean? And if they're willing to kind of take the day off school, that's going to show up in their workouts, or that's going to show up in practice. It just does. So when people say that people make it to these levels because they're talented, they are missing the most important part of the picture. The most part of the picture, they're making it because they are unbelievably driven. And you just have to be wired that way. You just do. And they are. And that's been the most that thing I can state. I haven't coached every NFLer in the world, but every kid that we've had that has been special has always been special. And it doesn't mean if they're a C student, they're a C student. And if they're a B student, they're a B student. And if they're supposed to be in the gym this much, they're going to be in the gym that much, and they're going to ask the trainer, what can I do safely to do more? That's just the type of kids that they are. Yeah, that is really what it was. And it was something. Yeah, it was something.
Yeah. Well, you talk about having that ick factor and the extra bit, the drive, everything else. We have to talk about in this podcast one of our favorite players, Maya Turner, and what she's doing and how she is coming into this. Obviously, it'd be really, really easy for a team like yourself or just anybody to say, yeah, we do have a female on our team here, and technically she has a jersey number, and then just kind of push her off to the side and just say, we have this, but we're not really going to use it as much. But to have her there as the place kicker and to see what she has done. Now, obviously, we mentioned about the double OT, whatever, but that does not define her, because she's done so much for this team and this program, and breaking down barriers of being a woman on a male-dominated sport and male team. And from everything that I've seen on the outside looking in, somebody who has completely been welcomed into that program by the players, by yourselves as well. Talk to me a little bit about what she has done with your team and how she's been just a part of the Bisons program.
Yeah, it's funny, like, people ask, but then I have to start thinking about it because I don't think of her any differently than any of the other kids. She's just a member, and and to me, in general, the things that I love about football the most is it's the great meritocracy. At all colors, creeds, sizes, whatever. Football doesn't care. And oftentimes football is getting like kids from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who, you know what I mean? And there's a especially when you're dealing with younger kids, you're always encouraging them like, hey, there's something for everybody here. You want to be involved and become part of a team. And so I think you're right. I suppose in the wrong place, it could have gone poorly for her. But the one thing I'll say, people can say whatever they want about our kids. If you tell me that we have bad kids, I'll say you're lying, and you don't know these kids. They're great kids, and they're caring kids, and they're welcoming kids, and yeah. So I mean, I don't consider Maya any different than anybody else on our team. She's the best kicker on our team, and she's one of the best kickers in our conference. And I don't think twice about sending her out. It doesn't even cross my mind that she's a female. It just doesn't. Like she's just the player on our team who's and talk about a kid who does everything right. Now there's one I never have to worry about. I know her grades are going to be good. I know she's going to be at all her workouts. You know what I mean? So, I have nothing but great things to say about her as a person and as a player. She's evaluated the same as the rest of our team, and she's given the same opportunity. And hopefully, our kids see it as a fair shake. And she's the best kicker on our team, so we keep rolling her out.
He is the head coach of the Manitoba Bisons, the Herd, Coach Stan Pierre. Coach, thank you so much for joining us, talking to us about your club, your experience with the Bisons, and we hope for the best for you going into spring ball. What will no doubt be a great summer, and then what is going to be another just full knives out at the table battle that is CanWest football every year. So thank you again for joining us, Coach.
Yeah, I really had a great time. So thanks for inviting me. And if you guys ever need anything, don't be afraid to hit me up. I wish you. I hope you get all the coaches in youth sports, and you guys have a great year covering our sport. The more people covering our sport is important. Obviously, I'm biased, but as a youth sports coach, I think we have a great product, and our kids are playing a great brand of football, and we'd like to get it exposed to as many people as possible. So I appreciate the stuff you're doing.
Amazing. Well, I don't know exactly which school we'll be tuning into, but it's certainly going to be somewhere east of CanWest. So tune in right here next week at the 55.